talent fragmentation in tech in the Valley. Really easy to start a company, really cheap to spin up. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. There's a very acquisitive environment. All these factors, right? So as as a VC and someone who spent a lot of time in the Valley, how bad is the talent fragmentation, one? And two, how does that affect how you guys make investment decisions?
I think there's an extreme fragmentation of talent right now because of all the trends you've talked about, which is the cost of starting a company, at least on the consumer side, the ability and the diversity of resources to get the first $100,000 to $500,000 of energy into the system, and the belief that there's a likely acquisition if this doesn't work out. So the risk profile or the perceived risk profile has arguably changed. So an entrepreneur believes if I start something and it doesn't work out, there's a safety valve, whereas historically you would fail. And that might have deterred people from jumping off of a cliff. I don't know that the expected value has changed at all, but the perception has certainly shifted. Now, as I talked about last time, I believe to create a one-of-a-kind company, you need to assemble a critical density of talent, and you need to sustain that, keep people together across different genres and disciplines, from design to engineering to business to marketing to legal. And if you can't assemble that and you can't preserve it, it's very difficult to be a one-of-a-kind company. It's amazing like what Amazon's been able to achieve, but you look at the retention of Amazon employees, or the median time they've stayed with Amazon. Even Google, which has had an incredible ride, has been able to preserve a lot of their talent, and they've come up with some creative strategies around preserving that talent to ensure that it doesn't get diluted back into the ecosystem and generate competitive threats to Google. So I believe that in a hot economic environment, it's very difficult to create a breakthrough company. What you need to create a breakthrough company is, first of all, a missionary zeal. Peter Thiel has a question that he asks entrepreneurs before he funds them, which is, explain to me how you're going to recruit your 20th employee. Because you can recruit your first 8 or 10 through just raw brute force. But at some point, you have to actually be able to go into the market and have a differentiated value proposition and be able to sell people that they should chase this dream as opposed to their own dream, and that they're more likely to be successful, more likely to have psychological rewards, more likely to have impact in the world by joining your dream. And that becomes increasingly difficult as you go from 10 employees to 20 to 100 to 1,000. So the entrepreneurs who can do that well, who can craft that narrative, who actually are chasing a narrative that's worth chasing, actually can potentially survive and thrive in today's environment. But it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, not to talk your book, but I actually think Patrick from Stripe is one of the few people I've met who's actually been able to do that.
No, it's incredibly impressive. I think that was one of the motives that led us to want to invest in Stripe. Was it was very obvious that even in the first 10 and 40 and now 80 employees that they've been able to aggregate in an immense array of talent. And eventually that talent is self-fulfilling. So startups are very path dependent. If you take the best people in the world and you chase a problem, a very difficult problem, the chance you surmount that problem is very high. If you take just really good people and tackle the same problem, it may be a 10% chance. If you take mediocre people, it's like 0. So depending upon the challenge, the order of magnitude of the challenge, you need a different array of people, but that changes the prospects for success. It also becomes self-fulfilling. And the famous adage, often ascribed to Steve Jobs, that A people attract A people and B people attract C people and all that kind of stuff, that's actually really true. So if your first 10 or 20 people are amazing, it gets incrementally easier to attract other amazing people. If your first 20 people are just okay, it gets very difficult and it usually gets worse.
So how does that manifest then for, let's say, an investor who's managing $500 million fund, $1 billion funds to actually do that? Do you sit back and wait? Do you try to assemble those teams and use your networks? Like, how do you operate when everything is so fragmented?
Well, I think first thing is you look for the signals that this team is special, that the founder can create a narrative and is chasing a problem worth solving, and that they're excellent at communicating that. And you can look at the first 10, not just the 2 founders on a slide or the classic management team, but the actual core DNA of the company is special. And then that you might make a bet just on that basis. I tend to filter first on that. If the entrepreneurs walk in and I believe that they're of that ilk, I am much more likely to invest than any other variable. Market, product, specific traction, specific metrics. Amazing people just find solutions and they attract other amazing people around them. So the real question is this entrepreneur one of the best 10 people on the planet right now to do a startup? And if so, you should always invest. And if not, then you have to get everything else right. So there are businesses with just really good people doing a really good job can thrive. And there are some businesses you just need amazing people. So for example, like Elon being a quintessential example, but most people would probably not, I would not recommend trying to build a rocket, rebuild a rocket, or rebuild an automotive car. Like those are just bad ideas for most people to chase. There are people, though, in the right hands, can assemble the right team, can motivate people through the inevitable roller coaster ride that those kind of companies go through, can raise the capital that's necessary actually to have a shot at pulling off those kind of companies. So that's why we tend to look for people who have incredible ambition, but also rare skills as the founding core DNA, and that they can hopefully amplify that core DNA and bring people who have similar desires and skills together and keep them together and preserve that for 5 to 10 years.